uh, sixth week or week 6 of our personality theories. We are moving gradually as we continue with biological and evolutionary approaches to personality. Biological and evolutionary approaches to personality. We'll be looking at temperament and genetic influences under this. Okay. We have been looking at different approaches when it comes to personality of humanity, and we've considered few ones. Today we are going to be looking at biological and evolutionary approaches. Biologically, temperament, evolutionary, genetic, if that makes sense. Now, why are we studying biology? Personality. Personality psychology historically focused on three things. Number one, psychoanalysis according to Freud, Sigmund Freud. Number two, behaviorism according to Skinner. And number three is trait theory, which we examined last week by Allport, Carter, and Ensek, if you remember. Now, biological approaches ask a different question. That's why we are considering it. And what is the question that biological approach or approaches is asking is that, to what extent is personality rooted in our nervous system and genetical inheritance? That is the question that the biological approach is asking. This approach, emphasizes, number one, brain structure. Number two, neurochemistry. Number three, genetics. Number four, evolutionary adaptation. Those are four approaches that that are emphasized in biological approach. Looking at the historical foundation of biological personality theory, let's look at that. Now, early thinkers, some people were referred to them as early thinkers, propose a kind of constitutional models that links body type to personality. Example of such early thinker is somebody called Kretschmer, was one of them, and Sheldon was also one of them. Through oversimplified, they opened discussion about biological correlates. Now, modern biological personality theory became more rigorous with some public figures like Hans Eyck. Eyck proposed that personality traits such as extroversion, neuroticism, psychoticism, they have biological basis that are rooted in cortical arousal and automatic reactivity. I talked about this briefly last week. Let me take it again. Eyck proposed that personality traits such as extraversion, neuroticism, and psychoticism, right, they have biological basis rooted in cortical arousal and automatic reactivity. Let's look at the temperament. Like I said, now I said earlier on that when we talk about biological, it could be temperamental. Let's look at temperament. The word temperament refers to biological based emotional and behavioral tendencies. I've mentioned this sometimes ago. Emotional and behavioral tendencies that appear early in life and of course remain relatively stable through lifetime. Sometimes it's considered the foundation upon which personality develops. Okay, that's temperament. Don't forget emotional, behavioral tendencies. Those are the fulcrum of temperament. Let's look at classic temperament research. Two scholars one of them is called Thomas and Chess. Thomas and Chess. In their New York longitudinal study, identify 3 invariant temperamental styles. 3. Number 1, easy. Number 2, difficult. Number 3, slow to warm up. The key insight there is that temperament is observable in infancy when child is young, before strong environmental shaping. Don't forget, we are made up of who we are today by nature and by nurture. Nature is what you inherited, not and nurture is the environment where you grow up. Nature and nurture. So, according to Thomas and Chess, temperament is observable in infancy before strong environmental shaping, which is nurture. Let's look at another person called Kagan. Kagan's behavioral ambition. Kagan behavioral ambition. Jerome Kagan identifies embittered children. Who are the embittered children? Fearful, cautious, high physiological reactivity. Those are referred to as embittered children. Okay? And uninhibited children, the children that are not uninhibited, that is the children who are bold, who are sociable, and with low reactivity, they are referred to uninhibited children. That's what Jerome Kagan identified. Now, the biological correlates include, there's a part of brain called amygdala reactivity. Part of brain called amygdala, right? And also ANS differences. When we talk about ANS, we are talking about autonomic nervous system. You know, when I don't know if you still remember your nervous system. For those of us who did biology, at a point, biology, this nervous system divided into 2. Autonomic nervous system. That's the second part of that division. So, biological correlates for that behavioral ambition involves amygdala reactivity and autonomic nervous system differences. Let's look at number 4. which is dimensions of temperament. Let's look at the dimension of temperament. Common biological temperaments. Common biological temperament dimensions. This dimension includes the following. Number one, activity level. Number two, emotional intensity. All right. I don't need to explain all these things. Children's activities level. Emotional reactivity. How children react to situations, to things. Their sociability. Some children, when they get to a place in 5 minutes, you will know they are there. They are highly sociable. So their sociability, their impulsivity. When we see something is impulsive, uncontrollably. Okay. Impulsivity. That's another dimensions of temperament. And of course, fearfulness. Those who are afraid, who are fearful. Now, temperament does not determine anybody's destiny, but it influences behavioral tendencies. Everybody has temperament. That temperament we have will have no effect on our destiny, but it influences our behavioral tendencies. Okay. The genetical aspect of it is this. Genetic influences on personality is one. It has stability studies. What are we saying is this? There are a lot of studies around that. For example, twin and adoption studies, which an example provide major evidences. In twin and adoption studies, they find out that, and they suggested that approximately 40 to 60% of personality variance is heritable. 40 to 60% of personality variance is heritable. So when you see somebody manifesting a particular behavioral tendencies, 40 to 60 of that traits you're seeing, of that behavioral tendencies you're seeing, are heritable. And also identical twins raised apart in different places will definitely show serious personality, similarities. If you look at twins that are very identical, all right, if you raise them in different places, they will still show some similar character. And this suggests that strong genetic contribution is there between both of them. All right? That's a heritable study. That's what heritable study, according to twin and adoption studies. Okay? Let's look at behavioral genetics. Behavioral genetics look into gene environment interaction, not just gene alone. Okay, because what we are looking at now is behavioral genetics. So gene environment interaction, gene environment correlation. We look at something we call epigenetics. If I begin to explain all these things, you will have 1 hour video, and I don't want to have 1 hour video because you need to do a diligent work by reading your text or reading more about all these things I'm saying. The important distinction here is that gene predisposes. They do not predetermine. Gene can show a tendency in someone, but do not predetermine it. Molecular genetics. Let's look at molecular genetics. Researcher has investigated that specific gene linked to dopamine regulation. Okay. For example, novelty seeking, that's part of dopamine regulation, and also serotonin transport. Don't forget, when we're talking about serotonin, we're talking about dopamine, serotonin, you're talking about hormones, okay, that regulates human system. For example, serotonin now is the hormone that regulates our mood regulation, okay, mood regulation. And under molecular genetics, another one is impulsivity traits. Also, gene is linked to impulsivity traits. However, no single personality gene exists. No single personality genes exist. And of course, personality is polygenic and complex. Personality is polygenic and complex. So you can't. That's why it's difficult to come to assumption in anything. You can't assume anything because it's very, very polygenic and very, very complex. Okay. Let's look at evolutionary approaches to personality. When we talk about evolutionary approaches to personality, evolutionary theory asks this question: why do certain personality traits exist across culture? That's the question. Because traits may have adaptive value. For example, looking at the big five, extraversion. We're talking about that. Group cohesion, mate selection. When you look at neuroticism, we're talking about threat detection. When we look at conscientiousness, we are talking about survivor planning. And when we talk about agreeableness, we are talking about social cooperation. So variation may be evolutionary advantageous in different environments. Okay, so you need to understand that. Looking at the neurobiological, and personality, neurobiological research has connected traits to brain system. Anywhere you hear neuro, it has to do with brain system. Please don't forget. So research connect traits, our traits, to our brain system. For example, looking at extraversion, there is dopaminergic reward pathway. Some of you will have problem with what I'm teaching today because if you don't have psychology background. But for those who have psychology background, they won't have any problem with it. That's why you need to read more about this. I don't know if I'm speaking above you because, psychology is my discipline. So I'm diving so much into this and I'm careful because I know you don't have psychological background. So you need to just read more about this, right? So I'm talking about neurobiology, okay, and personality. And I've told you anyway you hear neuro is talking about brain system. So it functions in different way, both on genetical, evolutionary. Now we're looking at neurological. They are not functioning the same way, okay? And looking at neuroticism under neurobiology and personality, there is something we call limbic system reactivity. Limbic system reactivity. That's because all this dopaminergic, limbic system, prefrontal cortex, they are all brain, they are all associated with brain. Okay, how our brain functions. And when you look at impulsivity, that has to do with prefrontal cortex regulation. Now, let me use that to explain what I'm talking about. In brain, there are different compartments in our brain. Now, there's something we call prefrontal cortex. Where I put my hand is called prefrontal cortex of the brain. That will not develop to completion until we are around between 21, 22, 23, 24. That's when human being reach the peak of that development. So because the prefrontal cortex has not fully developed, there is tendency for impulsivity, uncontrollable actions and behaviors in children, in people. Okay, this prefrontal cortex, the more it develops, the more we are regulated. So if until we complete our development between the age of 18 and 24, we call it emerging adulthood. So between the age of 21 and 23, 24, prefrontal cortex or executive functioning, maybe you will understand that executive functioning will fully develop. And when that is fully developed, they will be able to regulate appropriately and control themselves from impulsivity, uncontrollable behavior. So brain imaging studies, the study of the brain imaging, support biological correlates of personality traits. All what I'm talking about today is a research that have been done and concluded. Okay, brain imaging. You take the brain of a man and begin to look into it, to study it, and that's what they found out, that biological correlates of personality traits. What is the strength of biological approach? Don't forget, what we are looking at today is biological approach. What are the strengths of biological approaches? Number one, it's measurable empirically. Okay, like I just cited the brain imaging to you now, and genetics. You can go to lab and do work, and do your work, do your research on them. So empirically verifiable and measurable. Another strength is that cross-cultural consistency. If you do it in Nigeria, if you do it in America, if you do it in Europe, you get the same results. That's biological because it's human. Okay, cross-cultural consistency is there. Another strength it has is that from early life you can predict. There's early life predictability. Early life predictability. You can predict it as early as possible, and you can predict it and be correct. Another strength of biological approach is that it's integrated in with neuroscience. I was talking about neurobiology the other time, so it is integrated into neuroscience, and of course there is scientific reliability and credibility. scientifically. If it is empirical, it can be believed. It can be believed. We are rounding off. Let's look at the limitations of biological personality theory. There are some limitations in that. Yeah, one of the limitations is reductionism. Reduction, reducing personality solely to biology. Okay, why you ignore environment and culture? That's number one. Reductionism. Reductionism. Number two is determinism risk. That is, there's tendency to overemphasize genetics, which may minimize agency and autonomy of an individual. Number three is complexity problem. Gene environment connection or interaction are intricate. They are intricate. They are intricate. Number four is ethical concern. But ethical concern. No, genetic labeling may stigmatize individual. We're talking about genetics. So genetics labeling can stigmatize people. That's its limitation. Another limitation is, there's a limited explanation of meaning and value. In biological theory, we only explain mechanisms. Nobody has time for your purpose, or values. Those are limitations of biological personality theory. Okay, let's look at integrative perspective of this. Modern personality psychology recognizes biology provides structure, environment also shapes expression, culture moderates manifestation, personal agency influences outcome. Nature and nurture, as I've said earlier on, are not opposite. They are interactive system. I've discussed that the other time. That all of us are victim of nature and nurture. Okay, they are interactive system. They are not contradictive system. When it comes to counseling and pastoral context, you need to understand temperament to improve your empathy. All right, you need to recognize biological predisposition, which reduces moral judgment, and also emotional regulation, too, that has a lot of strategies, must also look into temperament, must consider temperament. All right. Leadership styles may reflect also biological tendencies. Leadership style. And the last one under that is that, in mental health interventions, as we treat people of their mental health challenge, we also integrate neurobiology. Let me give an example. We integrate neurobiology. When I am working with people who are suffering from addiction, sometimes I explain to them the impact of substances on our brain. Okay, there's something we call plasticity of brain. Plasticity of brain. That is ability of brain to keep changing through lifetime. So when you begin to take substances, you take drugs, take all those things, there's going to be, distortion in the brain. There's going to be a lot of problem with the brain. Okay. See now, and which will determine your personality and the way you manifest. You take substances, it affects your brain, then you have mental health problem. Can you see the connection now? That exactly is what I'm talking about. So in mental health intervention, so when I'm talking to them, I'm doing intervention, I bring their attention to the impact the substances is having on the brain. So when I explain that to my clients, some of my clients, sometimes they say, oh, we don't know. Oh, you don't know. That's how it is. I hope you get that now. I'm just citing that as an example. So mental health intervention must integrate neurobiology. And I've told you when we talk about, neuro, don't just mix it. We're talking about brain system. I hope that makes sense. So I expect you to read the readings for this week and listen to this video if it is helpful for you and read more about this. This is PhD class. This is not undergraduate. If it's undergraduate, I will need to break down a lot of things. But this is it's graduate or postgraduate. So at the end of this week, you must be able to explain what is temperament. You must know what temperament is and its biological foundation. You must be able to, discuss genetic contributions to personality. You must be able to look into twins and adoptions study findings. You must be able to explain that. You must be able to critically assess strength and limitation of biological theory, and you must be able to integrate biological insights into broader personality framework. These are things I expect you to be able to do this week. It's a lot. Like I've told you, we're diving so much into the real work now. So today, that's why today we are looking at biological and evolutionary approach to personality. So listen to this video over and over and over and over. You'll be able to understand why you are reading your text for this week. I hope this will help you. I know some of you don't have psychology background, but with the way I explain it, by the time you are reading your book, you should be able to connect with what we are studying. That's what makes you, by the time you finish your PhD, that's what makes you a PhD student. PhD student, you are not just narrow-minded person, you know a little thing about everything. That's why we call you Omowe. It's not a fun, it's not at that level, you must know little about everything. Now you are in psychology, though you are not a psychologist, you are not a major, you are minoring in psychology courses, but we expect you to still be able to understand what we are talking about. Right? I hope this will be a blessing to you. So until I come your way next week, please take care.